Welcome to the ASEAN Wonk podcast, where we bring you expert insights and regional perspectives on Southeast Asia and Indo-Pacific geopolitics and geoeconomics. I'm your host, Dr. Prashant Paramaswaran. If you haven't already, do subscribe to the ASEAN Wonk platform at www.aseanwonk.com so you don't miss all our posts. Our guest today is Fidelis Mangalyans, who is a former minister of the Presidency of the Council of Ministers in East Timor, and he has nearly 2 decades of policy and government experience. We start our conversation talking about the country's pursuit of full ASEAN membership and its development trajectory. Make sure you tune in to the full episode as we go through a range of other subjects, including major power involvement and future geopolitical and geoeconomic prospects. So welcome to the ASEAN Wonk podcast, Fidelis. Thank you for joining us, and let's get started. I wanted to talk more specifically about Timor as a country, because I think as we were talking just before we came on live, it is a country that often doesn't get the attention that it deserves within Southeast Asia. I did want to start with Timor's pursuit of full ASEAN membership. It is the country that is in Southeast Asia, but remains out of ASEAN in terms of full ASEAN membership as of now. But that's changing, with ASEAN already agreeing to Timor joining the institution as a full member. That's a process that's still in a process of being underway. I recall President Ramos Horta once referring to ASEAN as being more difficult to get into than heaven. But that being said, Timor has undergone a lot of steps that are necessary for full ASEAN membership. And this is a very complex process. A lot of the steps are not just taken by Dili itself, but also other ASEAN countries in terms of diplomatic sort of infrastructure, flight connectivity. A lot of those aspects are still being worked out and progressing. I guess there are a lot of headlines periodically that focus on ASEAN membership, about it as an institution, but you as a policymaker have a sense of the significance of what this means for actual policy and for Timor's foreign policy and geopolitical and geoeconomic landscape. Could you help perhaps explain the policy significance of Timor's admission to ASEAN, and why does it matter from a historical and contemporary perspective?
Well, thank you very much, Prasant, for the opportunity. So let's start with ASEAN membership, or at least with the most recent development. I think, as you rightly pointed out, President Ramos Horta once said that it was more difficult to get into heaven rather than joining ASEAN. I think at this stage, the signals that we've been receiving from Malaysia, who's now the chair, which chairs now ASEAN, and from other members, we have been receiving quite a significant and more promising signal. So in a sense, I think the expectation is, or where Timor-Leste is Timor-Leste is somehow around the corner from heaven, but maybe not 100%, not entirely inside. So the expectation or the signals that we've been receiving here from Timor-Leste, or at least the sense, is that maybe still this year Timor could join. And at least from the policymakers or from present government's viewpoints or statements, is that it is realistic to expect Timor-Leste becoming a full member or acquiring full membership in 2025. But again, there are still there are still things to be done policy-wise and streamlining policies to adapt to the ASEAN standards. So it all remains to be seen. But I think from Dili's viewpoint, I think there is a new sense of optimism.
Great. Yeah, thanks for that. And as you mentioned, Malaysia and its ASEAN chairmanship, the sort of twin pillars are inclusivity and sustainability. And inclusivity from an ASEAN perspective and Timor's inclusion would presumably be sort of part of that story. It would kind of make sense from a narrative perspective as well. I'm wondering if you could say a little bit as well about, I guess we were talking about this offline earlier. Um, Often there's a bit of I think maybe misunderstanding or lack of understanding about some of the very basic sort of mechanisms, right, within Timor and how it operates. So it is a country that on most indices is among the most, and sometimes it registers as the most democratic country in Southeast Asia. But I know President Ramos Horta and other officials have said, in spite of the fact that Timor registers quite well on these metrics, they also hope that Timor can improve on the economic metrics as well, because it remains one of the lesser developed countries in Asia, and also one of the lesser connected countries within Southeast Asia, right? I think, for people who have gone to Timor, there's only a few places that you can get flights actually, right, registered, and hopefully this kind of changes over time. But can you provide us with a sense of that sort of regional connectivity, right? Because Timor, there's links to Indonesia, there's links to other countries as well, and relationships with countries that are quite important and are evolving with, countries like Singapore, for example. How do you kind of assess not just the issue of ASEAN membership, but connectivity of Timor as a member of the Southeast Asian neighborhood and community?
Well, let's start with this, going back in time slightly. So I think from the 70s, since the 70s, for Timorese leaders, back then, the frontline leadership, believed that it was important for Timor-Leste to be a member of ASEAN for political reasons. And this continues to be, at least I think, imprinted in political discourses within Timor-Leste. And the thinking remains the same, that it is imperative for Timor-Leste to be a member of ASEAN in order to ensure our long-term security and also in order to gain voice internationally. Because as you know it, globally, it is so, the practice these days is for countries to be members of their immediate neighboring alliances or groupings. Well, Timor-Leste and probably Timor-Leste and one or two other countries in the world, I think, is not or has not done so. So it is, for our viewpoint, it is almost incomplete for ASEAN to exclude Timor-Leste. Timor-Leste, from Dili's view or point of view, it is so natural for Timor-Leste to be part of ASEAN, because you may economically, whatever it is that you'd like to actually base your assessment on, I think culturally, economically, Timor-Leste is part of Southeast Asia, of ASEAN. It is embedded. It is a natural member of Southeast Asia. And the maritime Southeast Asia is obviously quite incomplete without having Timor-Leste in as a member. Now, we understand that there are disagreements, there are concerns, and this is not only something which I think concerns observers or members of ASEAN. Even the Timorese, we are normally very harsh in terms of assessing our own advances or our own progress. We believe that socio-politically we have made a lot of advancements. We've achieved quite a lot. But in order for these achievements, the socio-political achievements to be sustainable, you'll need to combine it with socio-economic or economic development. Now, whereas we are advancing quite fast, socio-politically or institutionally, or in terms of state building, economically we are lagging behind. So for us, it is also a matter of state survival or the continuity of the Timorese state or a nationhood as a socio-political experiment of building a democratic society or a sustainable society. We do not have time to waste. We need to actually push our economic development, or we really need to move ahead with economic development. So the hope, therefore, is that by joining ASEAN, we'll be able to adapt our institutions and our regulations with that of ASEAN, and that would probably make us more conducive for intra-regional trading. That would also be that would make Timor-Leste be more adaptable to requirements from ASEAN and also from WTO, the WTO, and more universal or global trading regimes. So that's, I think, the expectation. Now, in practical, what it means in practical terms? In practical terms, I think there is a lot of legal reforms that needed to be undertaken. There are a lot of institutional reforms that are needed because, as you know, our institutions, despite the progress or despite the positive development, their progress so far, they're normally based on an economy that is based heavily on petroleum, but also it is an inheritance to some degree of a rather centralized UN mechanism. Okay, so you actually need to modernize this, and you'd have to make sure that it is adaptable to the demands of a more embedded regional economic architecture. So we believe that ASEAN, as the future economic powerhouse, would be beneficial to Timor-Leste. So us joining ASEAN would, in a way, allow us or enable us to have a greater, larger market. As you know, being a small country, we do not have the privilege of having an economy of scale. We have to, for our own development, we will really have to be embedded, or be part of our regional economic framework. But for that, you really need a lot of work. We also have to work with the mindset, of the people. So the people have to understand the trade-offs. So people have to understand the challenges that may come with the opportunities. So economically speaking, what it really means, and the way in which the economy has been set up, that is largely based on some clientelistic system, you would have to realize that when you are actually exposed or be a player in a larger regional system where there is a demand for fair treatment for all players, then it probably may introduce some hiccups, some changes that may not be well received, at least in the first few years of us becoming a member. So these are, I think, the work you'd need to do. So probably learning from Singapore, from PM Lee Kuan Yew, where I think he chose for a rather open, a more free market-oriented economy. But whereas in Timor-Leste, I think to start with, the structural, the economic system was not that open, and has been, in a way, driven by the demands to actually to raise or to protect infant industries. But infant in this sense, I think, is understood to be national private sector. So there will be implications. But anyway, so from Timor-Leste's point of view, that it is very natural that for us to be a member, that I think it is somehow not well understood why we're not a member of ASEAN. So we have to be a member of ASEAN. But we believe that despite our economic challenges, in comparison with other countries who have joined, with Laos, Vietnam, and Cambodia, who joined in the late 90s, we're probably readier. So we anyway, so we think that we can be a member, but we are also cognizant that the path towards membership would require a lot of work, and our readiness still, to be fair, to be very frank, we will still need to do a lot of work. But again, it is not fair to expect Timor-Leste to be perfect prior to joining, right? So you can just join, you can have doors opened for you, then you upgrade and you upscale your own institutions or your own capability. So I think it is not fair, having acknowledged our weaknesses and the challenges, it is still, I think it is utterly unfair for Timor-Leste to be expected to be a country that has been independent for 50 or 60 years. It, in fact, has been independent. It became independent in 2002, and it is fairly recent.
Yeah, I think that's an important point that you make about the standards by which Timor is being judged, because I think you're absolutely right in terms of the fact that during ASEAN's expansion in the 1990s to involve more mainland Southeast Asian countries, these countries were also far from perfect, and they were undergoing their own reforms, and in some cases there are still some challenges with these countries, as we've seen with the situation in Myanmar, for example. That's occurring now. I'm wondering if we could switch a little bit and talk about foreign policy. I think there is a tendency to sometimes, I think, for outside observers, to sort of view Southeast Asian countries and their relationships and alignments from the prism of the United States and China, given the ongoing sort of geopolitical competition between the two countries. But I guess for Timor, historically, it's fair to say, I think, that in terms of the two most impactful countries in foreign policy, they actually wouldn't be the United States and China. They would actually be Australia and Indonesia. So I'm wondering, I mean, it's a pretty interesting time for both of those relationships. We have an election that just occurred in Indonesia, and we have President Prabowo now taking over in Indonesia. We've got an election in Australia this year as well. So changes and dynamics and shifts within two critical relationships for Timor. I'm wondering if you could also say a little bit about those two relationships. I mean, for Australia in particular, we've seen some focus on recent bumps with the relationship with Timor that's affected some issues like maritime security, for example, and we're also looking at progress on issues like Greater Sunrise, right, which is important for economic development, which you flagged earlier as well. So how would you characterize the status of both of those relationships and what we might expect for the rest of 2025 in that regard?
Well, but before I go go into this question, I think there was a part which I actually left off that has to do with connectivity, which you raised. I think Timor-Leste now is investing on building a new airport. And our airport is largely unused. So it only operates, I think, about 60% or something, because the runway is too small. It does not operate at night. So I think I'm just being lenient, being kind now to say 60%, probably less than 60%. So I think these are critical infrastructures that we need to work on to be able to improve connectivity. But there is a port which was built quite recently that enables Timor-Leste to be connected to countries in the region through trade and through shipping. So the Timor-Leste's relations, it may seem from afar that Timor-Leste is somewhat quite isolated, but in reality, Timor-Leste is well connected. It is connected through trade with Indonesia. It relies heavily on Indonesia, where it also suffers trade deficit. And with Singapore is a very important trading partner, and Timor-Leste also is suffering from trade deficit because the trade balance is quite imbalanced because Timor-Leste really doesn't sell anything, but Timor-Leste imports most things through these countries relying on the petroleum fund. So we hope that we can make use of this market access to these countries, that we can sell more to these countries. But again, we need to make sure that the airport becomes more operational. Airlines can increase in their capacity, and we need to actually fix our capability, our infrastructures for ASEAN-related objectives, for meetings, for conventions, for resorts, and so we can actually combine that with our tourism plan. So you can tailor to this ASEAN readiness component, but again, using that as a platform to improve your own tourism attractiveness. So when I was in government, I actually led this MCC project where I was the principal representative of the Timorese state in negotiating with America, where we secured around $484 million to finance projects in water sanitation and education. But more importantly, I think the water sanitation component, because I think in order to diversify, you have to make sure that really Timor-Leste has access to clean water, that the groundwater is not polluted, that people will not come to Timor-Leste and suffer from waterborne diseases or bacterial infections. I think these are very important, which will, in a way, help us to be ready for ASEAN and to be hosting important events in Timor-Leste, but also will make us more ready as a tourism destination. So with that in mind, I think Timor-Leste will be much more connected. So connectivity will then increase because there's also demand. And so trading-wise, I think in the long run, in the future, it is important for Timor-Leste to attract more investments from Southeast Asian member states, from Singapore, from Indonesia. We're working a lot with our friends from Indonesia to be bringing investors to come in. And about 2-3 years ago, I wrote about special economic zone with this idea that you can actually make use of Timor-Leste as market access, being an LDC, etc. When you have this shortage of capital, you can bring in capital. When you have an oversupply of labor in Timor-Leste seeking for job, so you can really combine this as you have different types of factor endowments. So this was the proposal that we presented, and I just hope that this government can really take advantage of that, because strategically I think you will only be sovereign or safe when you have other countries' interests deeply implanted on your soil. Because if you continue to be a parochial, isolated country with very little international financial or business or economic interest, then you will be alone, because then you will be truly an island. But if you have different interests on your soil, and I think there is then a much more greater incentive for countries to work to make sure you are protected or to come to your aid or to your defense in the long run, should there be problems. So this is, I think, the thinking. I think in terms of how to survive, I think it is essentially to be more open, to be more welcoming, to also be encouraging more capital, more economic investments to be coming our way to Timor-Leste. So the government is also cognizant of that. I think of different various governments that have come and go. I think normally they've somehow strive to propose pro-investment, pro-business policies. But I think you really make sure you really need to have the ability to make that to work. To the implementation, I think where the details are, and the devils are in the details, right? So I think that's where we are, and I think this was just a chance for me just to go back to where you touched upon previously. Now, going back to the second question, the second component, second part of your question, I think. So let me just probably divide into different blocks. I think first is America and China. Second, probably at a much more regional and immediate level, Australia and Indonesia. So let's start with China and the